Hi, this is F. Paul Driscoll, editor-in-chief of Opera News, with another episode of Sightlines. And my very distinguished guest today is Sir David McVicar, whose production of Fedora is about to open at the Metropolitan Opera. He has already opened Medea there, and his production of Norma will be revived just after the first of the year. So he's a very busy man in New York. Welcome, Sir David.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Can we talk a little bit about Fedora, which is an opera that not many people know terribly well? And is this going to be done in, for lack of a better word, a traditional setting that embraces, let's say, the world of Russian politics as happens in Giordano's opera?
Hey, what can I say about these pieces? I first started exploring the world of this verismo stuff with Adriana in London, and then we moved on to London to do Andrea Chenier. And I think the commission to do Fedora led on from the New York presentation of Adriana. So I'm sort of I'm very, very interested in these verismo pieces that can't take a lot of pressure, otherwise they're going to fall apart.
Yeah.
You have to sort of accept them on their own terms. They're stupendously theatrical. They have gorgeous lyrical music. They hang together as a great night at the theater. Can one mine them for very deep perceptions of anything? Yes, there are some things that one can mine. Are they a guilty pleasure and indulgence, a bit like binge watching Downton Abbey? Definitely, certainly. And is there a place for that kind of sheer enjoyment on the operatic stage? Definitely, certainly. But let's do it well. If that's what we're doing, let's do it as well as we possibly can. And that's the way I've always felt about these pieces. Let's give them the respect they deserve, and let's not, in any way belittle them. Let's really confront these composers on their own terms and do the best that we can to deliver.
Do you think that Giordano is underrated? I interviewed
Sonia. I do.
Yeah.
I do. He's got a great dramatic propulsion. I'm really glad I did Chenier first before coming to Fedora, because I recognize a lot of the same techniques which are going on. He's sometimes blunt, he's sometimes brutal, sometimes his dramaturgy fails him. In both pieces, crucially, there are two scenes in both pieces. I can't get, it will take too long to go into the specifics, where a great deal of information is being imparted at the same time in ensemble by a lot of people. In which case, I'm sorry to say this, thank goodness for surtitles. I hate surtitles, but in this case, thank goodness for surtitles, because otherwise it becomes impenetrable.
Yeah.
Okay, there are flaws, but there is a raw, dramatic flow and validity to his writing. And when it comes to the big, what he's great at is the big showdowns, the big duets between two protagonists. And he knows how to wring everything out of that. So yeah, I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be great to do this.
I was fascinated to read in one of the interviews that was published that someone had asked you about style, and you said style wasn't something that really concerned you. I'm paraphrasing, but the truth did. That what you were looking for is the dramatic truth in a piece. Is that something that you've been after all your career, or is this something that you discovered having done the tremendous amount of work that you've done in the Opera House?
That's an extremely difficult question, since I don't know what that quote comes from.
I can't remember either.
Let's just discuss this abstractly.
Mhm.
There's no point about simply putting style on stage, otherwise with opera's fashion show. Now, I've done a lot of big glamorous productions, especially in the USA. It's not all I do, which I think is a shame for the USA audience, that they don't know that that's not all I do. I can do it, but is it about the style? Absolutely not. The style of something derives from telling the truth of the story.
Yeah.
It's why I, as a director, am comfortable with using period if I feel that it's appropriate to best tell that particular story. But if I do period, man, I do period. I really get it right, you know, because I'm it goes beyond what the characters are wearing. I talk to the cast about the social mores. I talk to them about the way they behave with each other. I spend a lot of time talking about how you greet each other, what is appropriate for a man to do to a woman, how a man from a higher station greets a man from a lower station, all these kind of things. If I do a show in period, I do it in period. I really go for it. And in Fedora, we're really going for this 1880s period, because it absolutely is stuck in this particular story, this particular time frame. And I think it's wrong to rip it out of that. Otherwise, I don't understand who Fedora is as a character. If you rip her out of Imperial Russia, sort of what she does, her big mistakes that she makes, they don't make any sense. So no, style follows on from telling the truth of the story and pursuing that truth in a forensic sense, and making a decision about, do we do it in period or do we not? Sometimes I have not. Outside of the USA, very often I have not chosen to do something in period. But always I have this forensic investigation. Do the characters' actions make sense if I rip them out of this period? If it does, I'm happy to do it. If I feel that it doesn't, then I'm going to invest in that world. Does that make sense?
It does. And I have a follow-up question. I realize that the pandemic obviously changed the process for a lot of people, but typically, if you have a title handed to you and you say, yes, I'm going to do Opera X, how long does it take you to prepare before you come into the rehearsal room?
Goodness. Normally you have around 2.5 to 3 years to prepare for a production.
And where do you start? You, Sir David.
Excuse me?
Where do you start? I mean,
I start with the music.
Yeah. I was fascinated because there was another interview, and I should have the citation, but you were talking about directors who make opera singers do a reading of the text, and said that that is not something you would ever do because it divorces the music from the text. And could you talk a little bit about that? Because your musical connection is obviously a profound one.
Because the composer is there. The composer is a presence in the room from day one. If you begin with a rehearsal, we say, well, let's just talk about the text and let's not talk about the music. I don't understand that mentality.
Yeah.
You're denying the composer their presence. That composer may be dead for 300 years, but that composer has a presence because that composer has left those dots on that page.
Yeah.
And is inflecting every single thing that we think about and do as we're discussing how best to stage this work. the way that a phrase rises or the way that a phrase falls. Does the tempo suddenly change here? Listen, all I'm talking about is what every conductor knows.
Yeah, yeah.
For me, it's extremely important to work from the musical score and to have that music in my head when I arrive at rehearsals, so I don't have to waste anyone's time as I'm fumbling around, you know, trying to. I think I'm talking about tales I've been told by colleagues about other stage directors, but I don't want to really get into that.
Yeah.
The music is paramount because we are telling drama through music, and the collision of the words and the music is absolutely everything. And the music is the psychology of not only the characters, but the psychology of the whole arc of the staging of what we're doing. So to divorce the music from the rehearsals at any moment makes zero sense to me.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think that there's so much that's in the way text is set by the music. Repeats, for example. I don't think if you read the text when things are repeated, that it makes the same sense as when you sing them.
It's one of the reasons I love Baroque opera so much, and I'm sort of a little bit sad that I'm not so much known in the USA for my Baroque work, because in Europe I've done a great deal of Baroque work, and I've worked with some of the best Baroque conductors, and I just relish that opportunity because I love the da capo form of Handelian opera. It absolutely obsesses me, and I love the spirit of collaboration and improvisation between the performer and me and the conductor. When we come round to the da capo repeat, what can we psychologically say by what we sing? How can we ratchet up that situation and make it even more intense, or make it maybe the obverse of the way we sang it before? And, you know, and when you do a Baroque opera, having the conductor and the continual group present as you're exploring those kind of things, for me, is the most fulfilling aspect of staging opera, because we could abstractly just go, okay, let's write some decorations for that da capo. That looks pretty. If we go to the top E, that'll be spectacular. You get big applause. Okay, you get a conductor in the room who's watching the staging. It's my dog barking, by the way. A conductor in the room is watching the staging and is allowing the singer to work with me and to feel and discover how we should adapt the musical line that composers like Handel or Vivaldi or whoever has given us. And that sense of freshness, of discovery, of improvisatory performance is so fascinating to me, and so alive, and so much what I believe opera is about. It's I'm really sad I've not done more Baroque music in the USA. I really am.
Well, you're not finished yet, I would hope.
I'm very old now, man.
Not as old as I am. But can you talk a little bit more about composers that you find particularly challenging? I mean, you've done pretty much all the major composers in the opera house, but something like Wagner,
Wagner's not all that challenging. Wagner is consuming. Wagner requires a great deal of thinking. Also, the text is extremely dense. Because it's not really German. It's like Lord of the Rings German. It's extremely. I do find that very, very challenging when I do a Wagner piece. I'm in the process of preparing another big Wagner production, which I probably can't say any more about right now. So he's very much on my mind. It's also whenever you do him, you have to do a lot of reading around the subject. You have to re-engage your mind with what is going on in the background in Wagner operas, and you have to make a myriad decisions about what you want to present on stage. So Wagner's like that. My center of gravity is Mozart. I would say my center of gravity artistically is Mozart. That I'm totally in my comfort zone with this rep. I love it. I've been very, very lucky to have done most of the big Mozart pieces several times, which I'm blessed to have been able to do that. And I reach out from that fundamental base backwards and forwards. Verdi, I'm coming to terms with. I'm coming to terms with him. He used to leave me in quite a difficult place. But then I took on some challenges, like doing Aida in London. And I fell in love with that opera more than I ever imagined I would. Although, I mean, my production was particularly bloody and radical, and not many people liked it very much, but I liked it. But my big thing with Verdi was finally doing Falstaff. That's when I just absolutely capitulated and fell in love. And when I did Falstaff for the first time, I went, I get this. I'm home. This makes sense to me.
Was the first time this past summer at Santa Fe?
No, the first time was Wiener Staatsoper.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a difficult experience simply because of Wiener Staatsoper.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say any more than that.
I'm not either.
But then I went on to do another production, which benefited from the fact that I'd done a previous production. And I just totally capitulated and just fell in love with this crazy old guy. Yeah. Who is pouring out so much wisdom and so much love to the world at the end of his life. And it really, really helped me to rethink my attitude to a lot of the earlier Verdi pieces. You know, I've got a Traviata that goes around the world, and I do like Traviata, but now I like Traviata better than ever. And I've suddenly become terribly interested in pieces like Nabucco, which I've not done yet, but I'm sort of finally making peace with Verdi's musical language and his progress as a composer from the early Galli pieces, the Galli opera piece, you know, right the way through to Falstaff, with Don Carlos in the middle, which I think is a total masterpiece. Yeah. I'm talking about the French version. I think, oh my goodness, what a great opera. Yeah. And finally, in Don Carlos, Verdi writes a tenor role of searing complexity. Yeah. It's an anti-heroic part. It is so interesting. The music is so interesting. And somehow, weirdly, it's not quite the same in Italian. There's something about the setting of the French language that makes the French Don Carlos so much more like Hamlet. Yeah. So much more sensitive. He's so much more on the edge. And I absolutely adored doing Don Carlos in French at the beginning of this year at the Metropolitan Opera. It was a wonderful experience. Where did we begin with this question?
We were talking about Verdi and composers that were difficult and how your romance...
Difficult composers. I mean, I'm sort of reminded of when you were talking to Barry Kosky, and he was saying he found the bulk of 19th century rep quite problematic. Yeah. And I would maybe to a slightly lesser extent, because I do enjoy a lot of bel canto pieces, I would sort of agree with him. There are big issues to do with a lot of 19th century Italian pieces and some of the big French Maillard pieces, but we don't do those anymore.
Right.
But to a lesser extent than I think Barry expressed in the interview, which I saw him do with you. Move on, please.
Okay. I was a little bit surprised when you mentioned Verdi, because I have to say this. I love the Trovatore production, which I'm sorry, I saw it the first night in New York, the first night in Chicago, and the first night in San Francisco.
Thank you. You're terribly, terribly kind.
But it's the only production.
I hate that opera so much.
Why? I mean, to me, you solved so many problems that I've always had with the opera.
No, I did. I don't like the opera. I don't like it. It's two amazing female characters and two unbelievably boring male characters. They're being even more boring than the baritone. And to me, I mean, I admire a lot of the music. I found that production torture to direct. Really? Yes, I did. Okay. And I learned a big lesson from doing that, because I set that Trovatore production as a challenge to myself. And I learned a big lesson because I was so miserable doing it. And I learned, David, never accept a title if you don't fundamentally feel in your heart that you have something necessary to say about this. Like, don't work in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And with the Trovatore, I felt it was working in a vacuum. And I'm really, really sorry, everyone, to say that. And you know, you can troll me and do whatever. But that opera for me as a piece does not function. It does not work. I wish it did, but for me personally, it doesn't.
When you are looking, you've mentioned Falstaff, for example, that you've done more than once. I mean, is that something that's happened a lot in your career, that you're able to go back to an opera and do a completely different production? Yeah, that's why I mentioned Mozart, but I've been super fortunate with Mozart. I've done 3 productions of Don Giovanni. I've done 2 productions of Così fan tutte. I've done 2 productions of Figaro. I've done 3 productions of Idomeneo. Every single time. Also, at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, I have an ongoing, very elderly production of Le Nozze di Figaro, which I'm going back to revive again in the summer of next year. Every single time I go back to do that production, I find something with a different cast that is new. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I find something new to say, a new inflection, a new way of staging that scene. And it's a never-ending source of fascination to me. He's like Shakespeare. Yeah. Mozart is like Shakespeare. The way it is written is like Shakespeare. The same musical line in the hands of a different singer, in the hands of a different Cherubino, gives you different choices. Mm-hmm. The way that someone's voice fits into that vocal line gives you a different choice. Or the way that we attack the secco recitativo. Yeah. With an Italian. Last time we did Figaro in London, we had an all-Italian cast. The way it affected the recitativo was extraordinary. The rapidity of the way that we could deliver it, the spice of it, everything about it. But if you get a non-Italian cast, there are also benefits, because you can do something which is much more measured. Yeah. And maybe a little bit easier for the audience to tune into, because they're not being dazzled by this flurry of exquisite Italian consonants and vowels. I don't know.
it's Mozart is eternally fascinating. I will never ever tire of his music, not just his operas, but his symphonic music, his concertos, his piano sonatas. I will never stop listening to Mozart as a recreational thing, because I think he's the spirit of life itself. I really, really do. You're frowning at me like you don't agree.
No, because I agree with you. I mean, there's something about him. I always think in terms, it's almost a cliche, but there's something, he stayed young his whole life.
When I was first interested in opera as a youngster, like for ages and ages and ages, Magic Flute was my favorite opera. And there was just something about the sound world of Magic Flute that just gave me so much courage, hope, for life.
Yeah.
It made you believe in life. It made you believe, in hard times when you're like a lonely kid, you can get out there and you can, like there's a cohesiveness to our social world. There's a possibility for our lives, there's a possibility for our ability to find love.
Yeah.
And I find all of that in Mozart.
How did you choose this career as an opera director as opposed to what was when did you know that it was for you? When was that choice made for you?
We don't have time for the whole backstory.
Oh, we do.
We don't.
Okay.
Listen, opera was a big part of my life when I was a kid, but in a very, very private. I wish I could tell the beautiful stories about my grandmother. I went to her house and she played Caruso to me, and then I was taken to see opera at the age of whatever, and that didn't happen. It was a very, very private thing. The crucial thing that happened for me when I was a kid, and millennials aren't going to believe this, is when the family acquired a second television. And I was no longer stuck on a Sunday night having to watch what everyone else wanted to watch, which was, whatever. And the second channel on the British Broadcasting Corporation at that point fulfilled their remit to actually cover the arts properly, which they don't do anymore. And I can remember being about 9 years old, and it was Christmas time, and sneaking away and turning on the television, and something came up, and it was Ingmar Bergman's film with Magic Flute. And I just sat, and everyone else was busy doing something else, so I was undisturbed, and I just sat and I drank this thing in, and I didn't know what the hell it was, but it meant something so profound to me, and I didn't know why. So discovering opera for me was very much a private journey. It wasn't encouraged by a relative or a teacher or something like that. It was something I like in the dark was seeking out. And once I made contact with opera, I didn't think it would be my career at all.
Yeah.
First of all, I wanted to be an artist. I mean, a visual artist, a painter. And then I wanted to be an actor. And it was while I was training to be an actor that I began to be interested in direction, simply because I was receiving so much bad direction myself.
Yeah. It
was very, very frustrating for me. And I began reading a great deal about the art of direction. And then I had personal contact, God bless his soul, he died this year, with Peter Brook.
Oh, yeah.
Who I had personal teaching contact with him. And I learned things from him which was so fundamentally transforming for from the way I thought about being on stage.
Yeah.
Just the simplest little things. And I'm like going, why am I thinking about this character, when what I need to focus on is the tiny little task of how do I pick something up? How do I cross the stage? How do I greet someone? Because I do that every single day. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's relating. Acting is all about relating to the way that we interact with each other human beings every single day of our lives. But when you act, you have to think about it.
Yeah.
We don't think about these things. We don't think about, imagine you're in a crowded subway, okay?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know to give someone body space? You just know.
Yeah.
Acting is about looking at that, analyzing that, questioning it, and thinking, what does that actually mean? Let's move on to my interaction with another character. How do I feel about that person? What do I know about that person? What does that person know about me? Making really detailed decisions rather than just being generic, like going, I'm heroic, or no, I'm suffering, or, you know, which we still unfortunately see very much on the operatic stage.
Sure.
That kind of specificness that I try, I endeavor, I don't always succeed. God knows I don't always succeed. But I do try to bring to my rehearsals. I just ask of the singers extremely simple questions sometimes. You know, don't. Let's talk about Tosca. Tosca walks on stage. Oh, but she's a great diva. I said, yeah, can I just point out to you, we never ever see her in the context of being a great diva during the course of this opera. We only ever see the private woman. Yeah. So why are you bringing that baggage and onto the stage? You're a jealous lover when you come on stage. So right. Why come on with the flowers in your arm like this and be grand? No, be a jealous lover. What would you do? Sorry, you're a great diva. Do you spend your life playing the great diva? I don't think you do. And it's these kinds of interesting questions that I try to inform my work with. Carry on, please.
I have one other question, and if you're not comfortable answering it, please don't. But I would be remiss in not asking you about the arts cuts that have just happened in England.
My God. Well, I don't live in England. I live in Scotland, but right. Still parts of the UK. And of course, the English National Opera was hugely important to my development as an artist. We are at the hands of a Philistine government. These art cuts were the work of a particularly Philistine culture secretary who has since resigned as part of the ongoing psychodrama of the Conservative Party leadership just changing all the time. Excuse me, all the time. Cut that bit out, yeah. It is disgraceful, and it comes from a position of great ignorance.
Yeah.
This Conservative government have had this agenda, which they call leveling up. They've been going on at it for years. In culture, it's one of the few ways that they can actually show that they're doing something. So we are the victim of a failed political policy. They don't understand what E&O is because they don't know anything about culture. They want to transplant E&O to the north of England, where there is already an unbelievably successful opera company called Opera North, who serves all that audience in the north of England and satiate that audience. There is no more audience demand. There is an audience demand in London for two opera companies.
Sure.
English National Opera have a loyal audience. They have a fantastic orchestra, a fantastic chorus, a fantastic technical team, stage management team, all the people that service these performances, all the people that work at the London Coliseum. And out of sheer ignorance, this Conservative government, simply because they want to make a political splash, want to uproot this company or to end this company's life. And the E&O is Sadler's Wells Opera. They predate the company at the Royal Opera House. This was Lillian Baylis's opera company. Yeah. This was the opera company that premiered Peter Grimes. This has been the ongoing London opera company for as long as anyone can remember, and their work in developing young artists, young singers, musicians, directors like me, all of that is going to be ripped up and thrown away because of the political dogma of a government who lost any validity years ago.
Yeah.
And here in the UK, we're all in tears about it.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, from here, it's awful because it's a company that we've covered in this magazine since the very, very beginning.
Hey, fingers crossed and prayers, and I don't know what we can do. We're all doing everything we can think of. We're all writing to every politician that we can think of. We're signing petitions. We're doing everything we can think of. But it is we are in a powerless state here in the UK right now.
Yeah. We
really, really are. And we have been for several years. And I'm just going to say it out loud. Since Brexit, which one of the most insane acts of self-harm that any country has ever committed, we are now paying the political and financial price for that ideological insanity of the, I don't even want to say British right wing because that's not true. It's the English right wing.
Yeah.
We are all now paying the price, not just in the arts, but in our mortgages, in the cost of living crisis, which has been exacerbated by the catastrophic short reign of Elizabeth Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, her Chancellor of the Exchequer. And the present UK government is it's a national disgrace. It's a national disgrace, and I'm ashamed that I have that passport. But I do have an Irish passport as well, so I can escape.
Okay.
Too fierce, you know. I can escape.
Well, this is all we have time for, but this has been absolutely fascinating. I look forward to seeing you when you're back in New York. Fedora opens at the Met on the 31st of December, New Year's Eve, runs into January, and then right after that is the revival of Norma, which I'm also looking forward to. I've not seen Sonia Yoncheva do that. I did see it with all three of the ladies that did it when it was new, and I enjoyed it very much.
I will not actually be present for the Norma rehearsals, unfortunately, because I love Sonia so much, but I'll be busy doing something in Europe at that time.
Well, but you'll be missed, but
absolutely wonderful.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Sir David. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
This is F. Paul Driscoll for Sightlines with Opera News. My conversation was with Sir David McVicar, and thank you all for watching.